everybody. It's so great well, I can't see you, but to be here today. I know it's been a long day for you guys. I think it's pretty late your time. I'm over here in the US in the Northeast, so it's about 2 p.m. my time. But I hope you've been enjoying the conference. I had the pleasure of speaking yesterday too, so I'm excited to be back and talk about a pretty different but adjacent topic to the topic I spoke about yesterday. So my name is Melissa Jurkoic. I'm the co-founder of Diversify Thinking, an initiative that's focused on raising the level of action to meet the level of conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was really the topic that I focused on yesterday when I spoke with you all. For those of you that were able to join me, I really appreciate all the great feedback I've received so far. I'm also the Chief Customer Experience Officer at a tech startup here in the Northeast called Adaptation. And we really focus around user experience and creating great experiences for end users, which is really what I'm here to talk to you about today. So a lot of our customers that we work with really are focused around what I call like the digital transformation. That word seems, or those words seem tired, but yet still really relevant today because we're kind of always in that transformation phase with technology. So what I want to challenge you today is I'm going to introduce some concepts that I often say are left in the back seat as we're driving down the road, or things that we forget to really make like a first-class citizen in our thought process around technology. There's a particular stakeholder that I have in mind today that I'm hoping I can appeal to all of you so that you really embrace that particular individual. And you wouldn't be surprised that I'm going to be talking about users, right? Like the topic is how users don't have to suffer when we move everything to the cloud. And honestly, users shouldn't have to care either. And so that's what I hope I can prove to you in the next hour. I'm open to questions. So if you have questions, please share those in the chat. I'll probably wait until the end unless I feel inspired by some of your questions to take my talk in a different direction. I tend to kind of be dynamic and anecdotal throughout. So you might challenge me or inspire me to talk about something that I hadn't planned. So totally open to that. So definitely share those things. I want to lead off with a question to all of you. If we were in the room together today, I would ask all of you, how many of you in the audience, whatever your role is, whether you're in a leadership role, maybe you're in a user experience role or design role, or you're an individual contributor, so an engineer, quality assurance analyst, whatever your role is, project manager even, have you ever been part of a digital transformation or some sort of large technology initiative? My guess is, being that this is JCon after all, there's lots of you that would raise your hand. I know I have several in my career of now 25 years. So, and I've played a lot of different roles, wore many hats, so to speak, in all those things. So I can speak to being all those different stakeholders, both being asked for things and also asking for things. And so what I'm also going to follow up now with is a little bit of a harder question. This one kind of hurts a little bit. And it's, how many of you have been part of a failed digital transformation? And I'm raising my hand again. So, even if you want to pop, like, let's be true technologists here and do ones and zeros and speak in binary. If you want to pop a 1 or a +1, if that's something you've experienced, or, a 0, if God bless you, you've never had this happen to you and you've never been part of a failed digital transformation or technology project. I would challenge you to dig deeper if you're thinking 0, I've never been part of one, because I think you have. And I want you to keep that mindset of, when I was part of something that didn't go well, it didn't succeed or really have true success, longevity, long-term success. Why was that? And I want you to ask yourself, in the context of the conversation today, if maybe some of the points that I'm bringing up were the root cause of that failure. I think you might be enlightened by some of that. So let's get started. This is a hard truth right here. So similar to me asking you if you've been part of a failed digital transformation or technology project, if you're a true technologist at heart, as I definitely have been through the course of my career and still get really excited about the bright and shiny object of technology and what's coming down the pike and what's emerging so quickly, we get really excited about those things, but we kind of forget that not everybody's excited as we are. So we might get really into developing that thing using the next new coding language, or developing a new mobile app in a different way using touch technology, or whatever that new shiny object is for you as a technologist. But it doesn't really matter how awesome you think it is, or how incredibly proud you are of what you delivered and how artistic you were with it and creative, if your users don't actually use it. So that's a really hard truth. I've definitely seen this throughout the course of my career. I've been on teams and also had my hand at, again, several different roles, both at individual contributor, product manager, technical leadership roles around projects where we developed in those days, we called it shelfware, essentially meaning in the days when you used to buy software off the shelf, like literally in a box, so when you had like discs or CDs or DVDs, as time progressed, they were in a box, right? Like you'd buy them off the shelf. Nowadays we download them, we access things through SaaS, and we don't need to do that. But the analogy still stands. Shelfware meaning it's sitting on a shelf, no one's buying it, no one's installing it, no one's actually getting value from what you delivered. That's a hard truth, and it hurts a little bit as a technologist, or what I call like a creative artist leveraging technology, because you're truly proud of your creations and what you put out there, and sometimes we miss the mark. So why is that? Why does that happen? Why is this so important? So we all know that in order to embark on any kind of project, you need to get some sort of buy-in, right? So think big digital transformation. We're going to move from on-prem software to leveraging Salesforce as a CRM and move everything to the cloud. We have so many customers that I work with today on the day-to-day basis that they're doing exactly that and are challenged by these adoption issues. So we're going through that process. Well, who gets to say whether or not that's the right move and give you the thumbs up to go ahead with that? We know who these people are. They're your executive stakeholders, right? So these executive stakeholders are really important. Why? Because they hold the wallets. They're the ones that control the budget and the resources that you need in order to execute against these very large technology projects or digital transformations. So it's really a no-brainer that we're going to get executive buy-in. Of course we would. Like we can't move forward with the project and assign people and resources to be able to execute on it if we don't have executive buy-in. But what I want to challenge you with today is there's another stakeholder here who often gets left in the backseat, as I mentioned, and they are equally as important as that executive, and that's the end user. If we don't have end user buy-in, that's when this statement becomes really, really glaring, right? So if we don't have their buy-in, then they're not going to embrace the solution. They won't get value from our product or whatever we're building, our service. So it won't really matter. It doesn't matter how good, shiny, pretty, exciting. Let's face it, technology is moving at a much faster pace than we are as humans. So that creates an adoption challenge. People aren't as likely to adopt the latest and greatest. There are people that are, up, on the cutting edge, and they want to be those early adopters, but that's not the majority. It takes time, right? It takes time to get over that hump. So we need to focus on end user buy-in if we want to accelerate user adoption. So a theme throughout this evening, your time, is really going to be around how, as a technologist, we can successfully implement a technology initiative, project, digital transformation, whatever that body of work is. We can reach our outcome and feel really, really excited and proud of the work that we've done, but you're not done, right? That's not actually what success looks like. A successful implementation does not equal successful adoption. And the reason why, the divide between those two things, are about that end user buy-in. So I'm hoping that I can convince you again over the course of the next several minutes we have together that end user is not only just as equally as important as the executive, but there are ways to appeal to that end user and bring them along for the journey. So who are these end users? What these mystical creatures, these habitual humans, as I call them, and why is their feedback so impactful to what we consider to be success when it comes to technology? Well, these are those people, and these are the points of feedback that we often hear as we're helping our customers work through their own technology initiatives when they want to adopt, like, for example, Salesforce as a CRM, and they're struggling with user experience issues. People will use technology despite its downfalls if they're used to it. They would prefer to use something that doesn't do everything they need it to do versus learning something new, right? So this is, I've got a new thing in front of me. Yeah, I tried it. It's too hard. I don't have enough time. These people have full-time jobs, and their jobs are not technologists like us. And for the most part, a lot of these people, these end users, they aren't excited about new technology. That new technology is actually a distraction to them. It's a disruption. And we really need to think about that. There's change management that often gets left out of a lot of these technology initiatives. And change management is exactly about this particular stakeholder. It's about recognizing that when you put something new in front of these individuals, you're displacing something old. And that's what we often forget because we get so excited again about how we're making things better, but they're not always looking for better. They're looking for consistency. They're looking for, I understand how to do my job. I can come in, I can do my job. And maybe there's pain in some of the steps that I have to do. And maybe there's pain that's really introduced by some of the tools I have to use, but I know how to do it. And there's comfort around knowing how, right? The comfortable with the old system, knowing the workarounds, even though the things are broken, I know how to work around it. It helps me do my job, and I can do it almost like without even thinking about it, right? How many of us have driven to work and gotten to the parking lot and been like, holy smokes, how did I get here? Right? It's because we get into this mode, these patterns, these habits, where we're just sort of going through the motions, muscle memory, if you will. And that happens mentally too. And so we don't even think, we just do. And so that's part of why this stuff is so hard. Like if you're not getting the buy-in about why these new up and coming technology shifts that you're putting in front of these end users are going to be valuable to them, and making sure they indeed are valuable and focused on what their needs are, their unique needs, then you're going to get like, hey, you know what? I'm comfortable with the old system. Like I drove to work today and I was in the parking lot and I didn't even remember driving here, but that's all right. I made it. So we have to really focus on that. Like humans are habitual creatures, and they would rather do things that are even harder to do than learn something new. That's just, again, those early adopters are kind of unicorns, right? They're not the majority. So we need to be speaking to the majority if we want true adoption. So another thing is, again, back to change management, there's a lot of change coming at people all the time. Think about the pandemic. A lot of change, displacing where people worked, how they worked, if they had to take care of their kids while they worked, lots of things. So they're overwhelmed just to do their job. And so you're just adding something to that. You're not only displacing something, but you're also adding more work. So how do you avoid that? Again, all about getting that buy-in and making them feel like you're not adding it to their plate, they're accepting it. So there's a very different mindset about that. And then finally, again, back to the value, help them tell you what's valuable so they don't get to say, I'll just wait for the next version. This doesn't have everything I need right now, right? That's a very easy button to say, I don't need it. I'm fine without it. I'll just wait for the next time. It's sort of that like delayed gratification, although they'll never adopt the solution even in the next release. So be wary of these statements. And this is true feedback we've heard from end users. And it's the challenges that our customers, again, have had day in and day out. Someone asked me recently a really interesting question, very thought-provoking. They said, hey, Melissa, all the things we're building today with technology, do you believe in 2025? So less than 4 years out now, that everything we're building today will become obsolete. And I had to really think about that. It's a really interesting question because technology, like I mentioned, it moves so fast, a much faster pace than we do as humans, really. And a lot of it, I think, goes underutilized, because some people don't even know it exists or it's possible because there's just so much coming out so often. So I thought about this for a while and I said, you know what? I really need to understand what makes technology obsolete. How does that happen? I don't believe technology becomes obsolete because of new technology. And that might be a little bit shocking. And the reason why I say that is because I believe technology becomes obsolete because of these people. So if these people are saying things like, I'm comfortable with the old system and I know all the workarounds and I love to hate on it, and they'll just continue to use it, well, that's a pretty big sign that that's not going to become obsolete. But if they're ready to abandon it for the new thing because they see value in it, well, that's where obsolescence comes from, right? It's not merely because there's new technology available. It's because people are utilizing it. And so it's interesting because I think, when I thought about that question, again, I thought it was such an interesting question, such a simple but interesting question. It was around, how have I seen this play out in the past? And so interesting story, I worked in travel and hospitality technology for 2 decades. And, at the beginning of my career, we were just moving into like the Windows phase. I'm definitely dating myself, but the Windows phase of things, right? Still very much client server, on-prem, whole data centers, et cetera. But Windows, like some more of a visual act, right? Like before that, the software and the technology that our customers were using was DOS based. For those of you that remember, I think command line, right? Like I'm using shortcuts, function keys, et cetera. Less mouse, like no mouse actually. So, we were transitioning into more GUI user experience, again, incorporating the mouse. And of course that moved into touch, and then that moved into cloud, and like all these transitions over the course of my career. But I will tell you, when I left that organization 20 years after I started there, they had just like within 6 months of my departure, they had just finally transitioned their last DOS customer. And now at this point, we're all the way built an app in the App Exchange on Salesforce.com, right? Because we're definitely not sustaining the DOS application of 25 plus years ago. But there was still a customer on it. So I remembered that distinctly when someone asked me this question recently, and I said, oh, I can say with some level of certainty and almost a data-driven answer, no, the technology we're building today will not become obsolete in the next 4 years, maybe not even in the next 10 years, and in that example, even 20, because you cannot have the obsolescence if there are people still getting value from it, because they won't let you. And it's a struggle for large enterprise software companies, as it was for that one, obviously, because they want to sunset technologies. They want to only support 2 releases back, like pretty standard software business process. And your users are these people, and they don't want to let you do that because they don't want to move forward. Again, because the next level, the next version, the next technology doesn't make what they're using obsolete. And actually, in their perspective, if you don't get their buy-in, it makes their lives harder. And nobody wants to accept something openly and without question if it's making your life harder. So I'm here to introduce you to the end user and hopefully convince you that these people have valuable feedback, and it does influence the success of whatever you're doing with technology. It will make or break the success of it. I promise you that. I've seen it multiple times. Again, if we were all in the room, I'm sure you would have maybe hesitantly half raised your hand, but you've seen it too. And this is why. So, kind of do the mind mapping around failures you've seen before, and how easily people will revert back to what feels good, comfortable, even if it's not awesome, even if it costs them a half an hour of extra work. They'd rather struggle through it than learn something new. It's an absolute truth. Again, another hard truth for you, but it is the truth. And so that's why end user buy-in as critical, maybe even more important than executive buy-in, because even if you have all the money and resources you need to accomplish something with technology and achieve your outcomes, if your outcomes don't include success for this particular stakeholder, then I argue that it's not success at all. And and this inspired me, I saw a comment just now come in from Stefan around, I was in a project that was canceled because it's too hard to get into. Let's use Microsoft Excel again. So I love that, right? It speaks exactly to, comfortable with the old system, know how it works. Too hard to learn something new. We don't have time, right? Like we don't have time. We have a job to do, and our job isn't to learn your new technology. So thank you for offering that, Stefan. I think that that's really important as an example, and really kind of confirms exactly what I'm speaking to here. We've all seen it at some level. So what if I could tell you, or what if I'm about to tell you, that there's a way to think about this that allows you to have sort of what I would call a separation of concerns, where you really can focus around the technology side and keep that somewhat pure, like really think about what you're trying to achieve with technology. So example, if you really truly want to adopt Salesforce.com as a cloud CRM, it's an amazing database in the cloud. Quite frankly, we use it all the time. It's one of the things that they've done quite right, is to be able to have that configuration, clicks not code, all of those buzzwords. If you really want to do that, but holy smokes, right? That's a big impact on those end users. So that community of stakeholders that are using something today, maybe it's Excel, and maybe it's, Google Docs, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's a piece of paper. whatever they're doing today, you're going to displace it, right? They're not going to be like, oh yeah, Salesforce, it's all the rage. I'm just going to use it because it's so fun to use. And from a user perspective, Salesforce is actually not fun to use. In fact, they're trying really, really hard to work on the user experience, and they've made leaps and bounds forward. But honestly, that's adaptation. That's part of what we do, right? We create better user experience on top of Salesforce for these exact reasons. So you want your technology initiative to move forward. You want to accelerate that because, again, technology is moving at such a fast pace. You don't want to get left behind. You don't want to create obsolescence yourself by not leveraging new technology, but you have to be aware of these end users. So what we do here at Adaptation is we think of this in a model we call hub and spoke. And honestly, not to like dig too deep, if you don't want to look at it as an architectural model, I support you. If you're not an architect, you're like, Melissa, the word architecture just kind of freaks me out. That's totally fine. Really, what I want you to do is think about it as a mindset. Again, like that separation of concerns. It's really just a pattern to apply to anything that you're trying to achieve with technology. And because, again, anything you're trying to achieve with technology is going to impact the stakeholders that I talked about, right? Like you're going to have to ask for what you need from an executive stakeholder. Somebody in leadership is going to have to approve this project and give you whatever type of budget or resources you need and give you the green light. And then it's definitely going to impact end users, that other stakeholder that I'm sort of tooting the horn about today and really, passionately trying to get you to adopt as a mindset. So because it's going to impact those people and stakeholders in general, you really need to think about, how do I separate things in a way that I get what I want with technology, but I also cause what I would say is a seamless transition versus a violent disruption to those end user stakeholders. So we do this with what we call with hub and spoke, which again allows us to scale technology and support our customers' initiatives as they're trying to move to the cloud, but then also not impact negatively the experience of their end users. And how we do that is we keep what we call like database integrity, right? That should be probably a really common phrase to a lot of you as technologists, keeping the database accurate, timely, pure, solid, so that the business can get what they want from that. That's what we call the hub. So it's sort of that center circle here. Why is that important? Because if we don't have some centralized model, and that doesn't have to be necessarily one system, but it's a centralization of resources that really tell the story of the health of your business, to sort of put it in a more conceptual perspective. So your business needs that. Executive stakeholders really want that, right? Executive stakeholders aren't saying yes to your technology initiatives and kind of giving you the green light and the thumbs up for digital transformations because they love technology, most of them anyways. Maybe your CTO, but the rest of them are not. They're not doing it because technology is fun or they want you to, expand your skill sets. They're doing it because there's some return on that investment to the business. And usually it's because it delivers insights for them. Allowing technology to be displaced or disrupted or added on somewhere usually has a gain on the leadership side to give visibility into the business through data entry, through reporting, through several different avenues. But the point just being, the technology is an avenue to get that information about the business. So of course, the most important thing is to keep that intact, right? So that's what we refer to as database integrity of the hub. But all these other circles around it, well, what are those? We refer to those as spokes. And those spokes around that hub are really targeted toward a very specific end user. So again, back to that stakeholder that I keep beating the drum about, that end user has a specific experience and workflow, a job they're trying to do. Those people on the prior slide with their feedback, each of those people are unique. They have unique needs and their role. They have a job that they come in to do every day. And they don't care about necessarily all the other jobs of the entire business. So that was one of the concerns that we've heard a lot from our customers is when they went to adopt Salesforce, it was really tough because everything was sort of like information overload, like especially from a user experience perspective, everyone from every business unit could kind of see everything and it was too much. And they didn't want everyone to have rights over everything. And so there's ways to do that in Salesforce and it's getting better every day. But we developed a way where we can build that specific experience, right? And so we're really targeting for it. Okay, for the accounting team, what are they doing? Like, what's the workflow? Let's walk through their average day and what are they doing? And how can we build a unique experience, a spoke, that preserves database integrity and doesn't disrupt the hub and allows it to evolve over time, but it actually creates this abstraction, right? So instead of thinking of UI and user experience as like a single abstraction layer, like in an N-tier architecture, where you have like the user experience layer, the business logic layer, the database tier, right? Think about it as having almost an individual one of those for every single end user. That's kind of what I'm talking about here, because your end users are unique. Like if you're working across an enterprise company, you have different business units, even smaller companies, quite frankly. We work at a startup, right? And we have, obviously, there's a lot of people wear a lot of hats, but we all have different roles we play. Maybe I play a different role from one day to the next, but regardless, when I'm playing that role, I'm trying to accomplish a particular job. So how amazing is it if you're trying to accomplish a particular job and you're using an app that's all it does is that job? Boy, is that going to accelerate your ability to get your job done, which means, by the way, you're going to be more efficient and productive, and you're going to get more work done. And maybe even be able to wear many hats, because you can kind of silo yourself. Okay, today or for this next hour, I'm doing this job. I can crank through it. And now I'm going to, flip context switch to this other job. But my experience is distinct enough that it meets the unique needs I have when I'm trying to achieve those outcomes in those roles. So a long-winded way to say, if you keep the technology centralized and you're focused around your concerns around moving to the next phase of technology for you, your digital transformation, moving to the cloud, super relevant, will be for a long time to come as legacy and mainframe systems are still trying to peel away. If you can contain that and maybe think about it like as containing it, but still allow that abstraction around for your end users, this creates a pattern where you're able to get kind of the best of both worlds. Like you're getting that end user buy-in, you're satisfying what they uniquely need so that they're less deterrent to adopt the solution because they feel like it was part of what they wanted in the first place. And then you're also getting what you need for the business and for technology, where you're not always, on legacy mainframe on-prem sort of software, and you're able to move to the cloud. So it's that separation of concerns, like I mentioned, and our ability to think a little bit differently about how to organize that. So you're bought in, right? The end user is just as important as the executive here. Hopefully I've sold you on that to date. You understand that there's a potential to think about things in a different pattern, this hub and spoke way of organizing this information between centralizing the technology concerns and what matters to the business, the health of the business, and then focusing on your end users differently from that and kind of separating those things into this hub and then the associated spokes. So how do we go about this? Like what sort of process or framework do we use? So what we do here at Adaptation is we follow what we call our UX design principles, again, because we're really focused around the user experience. We're not designing whole new database architecture systems. We're not doing all of that. We're really focused on those end users, which is why I'm here to talk to you about them today. So it won't surprise you that you can't start this journey with any user if you don't know who they are. So you have to identify not just the job to be done, but who that user is. And we always challenge ourselves as we're going through this design process with our customers currently, because it's really easy to try to build an app for everyone. It's really easy to be like, oh, we'll just add this. We'll just add this. We'll just add this. I'm telling you from experience, even in my current role, when you do that, you sacrifice a lot. And so an example of that is we have a suite of educational applications that we deliver to some private academies. And, there was an application that we built that was very specific to educators, so teachers, right? And so it allows teachers to do pretty common things, right? Like view a class that they're teaching, see the students that are assigned to their class, so people that have registered for their class, assign quizzes, tests, assignments, grade those assignments, quizzes, and tests, like pretty typical jobs of a teacher, right? The job to be done by an educator. Well, there was this other stakeholder, this other end user role that was really focused around the admin, right? So the administrator, so someone that needed to see things across all the teachers, right? So like I need to see across all the teachers, where they're assigning work, or if they are assigning work. So there's some people that are auditing that. I need to be able to generate transcripts, which isn't something a teacher does because they're focused on their particular class and students, but someone that needs to generate a transcript for a student across multiple classes, right? This is admin functionality. So think like, front office staff, principal, superintendent, like that level at an educational system. We made the egregious mistake because a lot of it overlapped with what the teacher could see. It was just at a higher level to add some of that functionality into that same app. I'm here to tell you today that continues to plague us with every support case that comes in, with every enhancement that they request. And because like most things, I call it technical debt. We put it behind us, but it still plagues us going forward. The right thing to do is to re-architect those apps to really be separated by those very unique end users, the administrator and the educator. So it's focused on just their jobs to be done. Because even from the solution provider perspective, not just the end users now, even from your own perspective, selfishly, to be able to maintain, sustain, and really create a great experience that's more cost effective for you for delivery, you have to keep those things separated. So for us, there's pain involved because now from a testing perspective, we have to test both sides of the coin, like those different users, every time we change something to make sure we don't disrupt the admin versus the teacher. We have to make sure when we add features, it's only available to the people that need to see it. If it's not a teacher feature, and it should only be available for admins. So it's a mistake we've made, but I'm here to tell you, it really kind of validates that this process works if you hold true to it. And so sometimes we make those mistakes ourselves. So anecdotally, I would highly recommend like separating a job to be done. So, and when you start to veer off, you're like, oh, that's a whole different job to be done by a different user. It shouldn't be here. It's a different spoke, right? And that's okay. And that actually, it seems sometimes, I think people get worried about that, like it's redundant or it's duplicated effort, or it's going to create more sustaining and maintenance. It's actually less. And I have examples of both of those, and I could continue to go on and on about that, but I just wanted to share that one example because it's fresh, it's real, and it does affect us, pretty regularly when that particular customer requests changes. So really, it's really important to identify the job to be done for that end user and keep it isolated. And I think it's like only one place I will tell you that I ever advocate for silos is around this aspect, because I think silos should be broken down in most cases across most of the topics that I talk about. But in cross-functional, and collaboration is huge, right? Even my next point is around collaboration. But here I would say it's perfectly acceptable, and I advocate for actually creating a silo around this particular end user experience to make sure that you're providing the value that's unique to that end user, and obviously save yourself the pain of having to sustain all the different if else statements, if you will. And it definitely matters. And I think, what I would say here is there's a difference between providing value for everyone and how that results in no one getting value from your product, right? So there's a great saying that I used to say, and when I was in a role around, APIs, and it's like, if your product is built for everyone, then no one gets value from it. Because it's not uniquely built to deliver against a particular job to be done, or better said, an outcome that someone's trying to reach. So identify those outcomes and be specific around that particular user. A lot of times we do this by collaborating with our users. So I like to call this inclusive design. It's probably more lends itself to, because I talk about diversity, equity, inclusion as well. But when I say inclusive design here, I'm really talking about building with, not for. And there's a difference, right? So for those techies like and engineers like I used to be, you love to put your headphones on and just, start coding, right? And you hope that someone just tells you exactly what they want it to look like. You go and build it. You have some creative freedom. You come up for air and you deliver it. And I did that for many years as well. And I think the challenge there is that's building for your users, right? Someone else, and sometimes you're very disconnected from who that end user is, which is also sort of a recipe for disaster, because you're getting everything sort of, it's like the telephone game, right? It's third hand. It's not directly from the people that are going to be using the thing that you're building, right? And so you really need to have some level of direct contact, or I guess at least a feedback loop, right? So you understand how they're influenced by the decisions you're making when you're coding. And so, we come off for air, we deliver this thing, and then I'd find out 3 weeks later that it never got used. And that's a huge bummer, right? For someone that was such a techie and loved building, and then to find out no one's getting value from what you built. And so the disconnect there really is the building for versus building with. And when we spend the time to build with our users, then we're getting that really, instant feedback around what's working and what's not working. And we're able to adjust and iterate. And so it's that combination of agile and user experience design. And it really works. We find that when we give users the opportunity to see things early and often, they will absolutely tell us when it doesn't work. And if you deliver exactly what a user asks you for, it's never right, because they honestly don't know. What we need to focus on, and I tell my team this quite a bit, is to stay in the problem space, like love the problem, really embrace it. Because if you stay in that space and you really focus around the problem, the technology is the easy part, which is really another point that I, even as a technologist for 25 years, I'll tell you, because technology moves at such a fast pace, it is the easy part. There's always technology we can leverage. It just is getting easier. Pretty much, I feel like anyone can code. You can leverage low code platforms like Adaptation or Bubble or Webflow, and you can create these things pretty easily. So it's not technology that's the hard part. What's the hard part is making sure you're solving the right problem. And really, that's what I'm focusing here with, the first two principles is, who are your users? What are the outcomes they're trying to reach? And then how are you building with them to make sure that you're getting that buy-in, right? So that's the other point is, if I build with my users and not for my users, guess what I'm getting as part of this process early on before it's even ready? I'm getting buy-in. And remember, end user buy-in just as critical as executive buy-in. So just, again, I can't say it enough, that idea of building with and collaborating, it's really important. And it is how you get the buy-in that early. Maintaining database integrity. We talked about this quite a bit when I focused around, like, what is the pattern of hub and spoke architecture? And, how do you centralize that separation of concerns and centralize the information around business health? And that's really what we're talking about here. It's understanding what the business is trying to get out of the system and making sure that integrity is withheld, and that you're not creating these spokes or experiences that are going to, sacrifice or violate that. And I think that you have to keep that top of mind, even though you're focused on those outer circles, right? You need to always know everything I do needs to influence a positive outcome for the database integrity. So super important principle. Being where your users are really is so apropos now for the pandemic, where everyone's remote and still remote. And now people don't even want to go back to the office, right? So it's one thing to know who your users are and what they're trying to achieve and building with them, but where are they? Meet them where they are. So it's a very different experience, as many of you know, if you're trying to do a job on your phone, if you're trying to do a job on your desktop, if you're trying to do it on your Surface, like all of these things are different mediums. So how do you understand and appreciate that? Don't leave that off the table. That's really important. Do they try to do certain aspects on their phone because it's the time of day where they're doing that particular task and they're not at their desk anymore, right? We all have these things. There's something that I can check on my phone because I don't have to be at my desk. So I save those things for the latter part of my day. So I can partially disconnect, but maybe I go home, I get the kids dinner. Maybe I have a really bad habit of checking my work stuff on my phone, but I know I can do these fairly simple tasks on my phone. So know those things, understand and appreciate those things for those end users, because then you're going to appeal to how they like to work and where they like to work. Again, encouraging that adoption and buy-in from them because you've met them where they are. Now, finally, probably the most important part of this entire talk is really listening to your users, right? I mean, I started it with the collaboration aspect and really understanding and appreciating the problems that you're trying to solve. But it does no good to get adoption and the buy-in and do all this really hard work, right? And it is a big investment of your time. It's why a lot of people don't do this. It takes a lot of time to not make assumptions and not just deliver things because it's fast to build with technology, but to really spend some time in that problem space and love the problem. It does no good to do all of that if your users cannot easily give you feedback about how things are working or not working for them. So I'm here to tell you, you have to have those feedback loops, because just like successful implementation does not equal successful adoption does not equal successful retention, right? And so like, what's the point of adoption if you also don't have retention? So a couple things here, like make it really easy for them to give you feedback. Like it has to be really easy, and they have to know that you heard their feedback or they'll stop giving it. And I tell people, like, the users that churn, the customers you lose are the people that stop complaining. Or stop giving, not even complaining, that's kind of a negative connotation. They stop giving you feedback. They're not using your product. And we've had a few. I can look at their user stats. They're not leveraging it. They don't respond to our emails and outreach. So we've lost them. And so we have to do some pretty deep soul searching around why. What could we do better to make sure that we've made it easy for people to give us feedback, that we've provided enough avenues and options, and we've reached out to them. So I think, I'm seeing some interesting dialogue here in the chat. Why should we listen to the user? Although you say that honestly, they don't know what they want. That's awesome. Thank you for challenging me on that. And then yes, Henry Ford's quote, I love that. If you ask the people, they want faster horses. Absolutely. Totally aligned with you. And when I say listen to your users, I love that you asked that, because my next point was going to be right around that. That doesn't mean that they're right. So creating that feedback loop and listening to your users does not mean that you're going to do everything they're asking you to do. So listening to your users and acknowledging their feedback doesn't actually mean addressing their feedback. And when I say that, that sounds really weird, right? Like, well, then why would I listen? Because they need to be heard. They need to know they have a voice. It's really important. Well, for inclusion overall, but even with your user community, you will lose them if you don't listen to them. And they may ask for something ridiculous that you don't want to put on your product roadmap. In fact, this is why this is a hard step that people don't want to do, is because they don't want people to ask them for something that's going to be really expensive to implement. And they don't want to have to say no. But I'm here to tell you that people will respect that you actually address their feedback through communication versus like just delivering on it blindly, right? So it's an opportunity to teach them something they may not already know. So yes, absolutely. If you ask the people, they want faster horses. So don't ask them what they want. Dig deeper about what their problems are. So if you make it easy for them to give you their feedback, now ask questions. Right? So you're right. They don't know what they want. That's why you have to ask more questions, right? You have to ask, well, why do you want that? What are you trying to achieve? What is the job to be done? What is the outcome you're trying to reach? Because you guys are absolutely right. They will ask for something that it seems like the solution. They will ask you to solution it all day long. But what you want from them is, what is the problem they're having? Because there's a good chance the problem they're having is already solved. They just don't know how to use the implementation that you've already provided them. So there's a training opportunity. But if we never ask for feedback, we don't know that someone's inappropriately using what we've delivered to them, or they're not getting value from it, right? So we'll lose them. So great points. I love that. And I think hopefully that spoke to some of the things you were saying. So I'm asking you to do a lot. This is a lot of work. And hopefully you guys have realized that. For those of you that are not in the user experience domain or haven't kind of dipped your toe in there, it is a lot of work. There's whole roles and departments and teams that are focused around user experience design. Some people will, without that function, will hire external firms to help them with user experience and customer experience. So why do it, right? So I told you executive stakeholders give you the thumbs up around doing these things. This should be very similar. Like, how can you advocate for spending more time in the problem space and looking at things, from an end user perspective to get their buy-in? There is a return on that investment, and it's very real. I wouldn't be here to tell you to spend all this time and effort if there was nothing you're going to get in return. So clearly, if you get end user buy-in early in the process and you're building with them and not for them, clearly they're going to have less training needs, you would hope, right? So again, I mentioned in the feedback loop, they might come back, maybe they have a problem that they didn't realize they could already solve. I call that a moment of delight. That's like an actual awesome moment where you can show them that they can already achieve the outcome that they needed to achieve. They just didn't know it. So that's awesome. But for the most part, it really does reduce training costs. Like, we don't do formal training with the apps that we build for our end users, the customers' end users. And why is that? Because it's intuitive enough that they actually don't have to be trained, because it's been built, catered to their workflow. It's really focused around their job to be done. They know their job. So if we've aligned it with their job to be done, unless we get it wrong, which it happens, the experience is very organic, and it feels like an extension of their human experience doing their job. So it's super intuitive, and that's really speaks to like spending that time understanding the problem. So it reduces training costs. Hopefully I've made that really clear. Accelerating user adoption, obviously, right? Like I talked about, getting buy-in from your end users means they're going to adopt it. Why? Because they feel like they built it. So they're not going to wait. They're not going to wait for the next release. They're excited about this. They're amped up. They've been part of the process. I'm working with a company now that they have this catchphrase, built by who their end users are for their end users. And I love that. And it speaks to this. It's saying like, you built this, so it's ready, come get it. And I think we see this a lot as well. Like when we're building with them, we've mapped it out with them and asked enough questions that then when they see the end product, they're like, yes, this really embodies everything that we talked about. And sometimes there's slight tweaks and such, but it really does accelerate their adoption. It takes, maybe days or hours versus weeks or months. It's a pretty significant acceleration. Optimizing team workflows is sort of what I call like a great surprise that happens some of these times that we've seen, which is a nice return on investment, where you'll find that they didn't realize in a workflow that there were things that were automated that shouldn't have ever been automated because they were always different. So it was causing a lot of challenges. I always say don't automate the things that aren't consistent manually, because it's just going to cause disruption and you're just going to do bad things faster by doing that. And then also the things that they didn't realize could be automated that they were like, well, there's no way to automate this. And then we are able to build it into the workflow because we just spend the time understanding the workflow. So really those are another example of moments of delight, or these happy surprises that we encounter during this process. And then, again, user retention. This is speaking to that feedback loop that we just spent some time about, in the chat. And it's successful adoption does not equal successful retention. So you might have this hockey stick of adoption for your users, but how do you keep them? Well, you keep them by listening. You keep them by listening to, who they are, how they're getting value or not getting value, challenges they're having. Again, this isn't about addressing all their feedback, but it is about acknowledging it and maybe educating in some cases. So, there is return on this investment, and it certainly takes time. So again, like if you want to talk more about this, I love the engagement in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free. We have a few more minutes. If you have more questions that you want to shout out or other feedback or challenge me some more, happy to have that conversation. You can definitely take a snapshot of this and let me know if you want to talk further or engage about like how we're doing this adaptation, or share some of your own experiences there. I'm happy to always talk about all things user experience. And finally, I'll just leave you with successful implementation, again, does not equal successful adoption. So your end user stakeholder is equally as important as your executive stakeholder, and getting their buy-in should be a critical part of your process. And so you need to think about how you're appealing to those end users. Awesome. So let's take a question. Do you have any suggestions on platforms or patterns to use in order to get input from end users? Awesome. I love it. So there are so many. I think there's one that's I've been getting a lot of mail and reading a lot of their content. Actually, I think it's Get Feedback, and they integrate directly with Salesforce. So it's been really interesting for us. But there's lots of both product adoption and customer experience platforms that allow you to engage with your customers. So from a customer experience perspective, just getting kind of overall feedback from them, there's a lot of platforms like Gainsight, Totango. I'm trying to think. precursive. There's lots of different ones around. If you just looked at customer experience platforms, you'll find quite a bit. I think Gainsight's probably one of the biggest ones that will come up. And then from a feedback perspective, there's a ton, like, again, like Get Feedback is probably the most popular one right now that I've seen a lot of really good content around how to incorporate that. And then there's a lot of ways that you can do that sort of, they call it in-app feedback. So, obviously we do that. I could say a little tell for us, but like we do that right within adaptation. So we provide all the apps we build, we actually do in-app feedback so that their end users can provide them feedback directly. And then of course we have access to that as well. So we can sort of mine user feedback that people are getting across all the apps we deliver for our customers. But yeah, getting that electronically and making it super easy. I mean, Salesforce, I would say, has nailed the concept of community, right? So just the Salesforce community in general and like how they engage not only with Salesforce to provide feedback in their ideas board and things like that, and to allow people to not only share issues and ideas with them, but then also vote and collaborate with each other. So that's idea of building community is pretty powerful too. So not just about getting feedback from end users directly to you, but how do you allow those people to communicate with each other is a really interesting pattern too that I can't say enough. Salesforce has nailed that idea of building community early. Thank you. Great question. And I'm a big fan of Googling things, so just be honest. So you'll find, like, again, if you look at product user feedback or community or customer experience, you'll find a lot of examples of platforms and, different patterns around making it easy to get feedback from your end users and the community. I also find surveys, although tired, if you make it easy for people to respond to surveys, they will. I sent a question out to all of our customers just a few weeks back, and as simple as better, right? So this was sort of generic feedback around just how we work with our customers, but it was one simple question, and it was just as we plan for 2022, what's one thing that adaptation could do better, right? So I wasn't asking you to spend an hour and a half writing a thesis for me, but I was saying, like, what's one thing, and really providing that open forum to give me the feedback directly. And I just did it via email. I didn't use any snazzy tool or anything like that. So that's speaking to not a platform or a product, but just, using email, old school email to our existing customers. And, I got like a 60% response. So that was pretty awesome. And I felt, that spoke to how engaged our customer community is today, and just a simple way to kind of check in and let your customers know that you are listening. I think it's really important to do that too. You're very welcome. You're welcome. So again, you're welcome, Stefan. Thank you for your interaction and your feedback. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. This is where you can find me when I'm not speaking on some of these topics. And I hope you guys enjoyed the conference. And, if I don't know if there's any other sessions after this, but if there is, please attend and be as engaged as you were in this session, because I know the speakers really appreciate it.